Hello, my name is Christiane and I'm a kinesiologist with Simply Health Solutions, and today I'm going to talk about a topic that I'm actually really passionate about, which is seniors strength training. Because a lot of people think that strength training is only if you're like super young and you go to the gym like 5 days a week, but actually strength training can actually be really helpful for just pretty much everybody. So I always try to encourage people to make sure that you are exercising and doing some strength training on a regular basis. So the short answer of whether seniors can strength train is going to be yes. You'd actually be surprised at how much strength training can be helpful for the average senior. And even people in their 40s, their 50s, like you don't have to be super young, and you don't have to be, on the older side to benefit from strength training. Pretty much anybody would benefit from strength training. And the thing is, muscle is actually remarkably trainable in later life. Adults in their 60s, 70s, and beyond consistently gain strength and muscle when they train, often at rates similar to younger adults. You'd be really surprised. I've had so many people, so many clients who were like, there's no way I could do that. It's just, this is me, I'm getting older, there's nothing I can do about it. But again, you'd be really, really surprised. I've had so many clients like surprise me, surprise themselves. And just with a bit of dedication, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to have a big expensive gym membership. You don't have to have anything too fancy, but you'd be really surprised how much it can be helpful. So there's this term that we use in kind of like the exercise world, known as sarcopenia. Basically, it's the idea that as we get older, we have this like quote unquote natural muscle loss that we develop as we get older, and it does get more intense as we get older. Now, I guess where I sometimes have issues is it feels like I sometimes wonder how much of it is genetics and how much of it is kind of our own belief that, well, we're getting older, there's not much we can do, time to settle down, time to, stop doing all the things I've been doing up until this point. I've met a lot of people who were maybe even like 3 years into employment retirement, and they're shocked at how much they've lost after not being in maybe like a physical job or even a desk job where it forced you to kind of get up, have a routine, and kind of continue moving on a regular basis. The problem is about 3 to 8% of muscle loss is lost per decade after 30. So again, we think of this as, we'll worry about it when we get older, when we're 60s, 70s, but actually even just once you hit 30, we start seeing a slight decline. And it gets faster as we get older. And about 1 to 2% of muscle strength can be lost each year in later life. Again, especially if we're not moving on a regular basis. And about 30% of adults over 60 show measurable signs of muscle mass loss. So we do want to make sure we are keeping that sort of thing in mind and that we are moving, again, on a regular basis. Now, it's funny, as an exercise specialist, everybody thinks of exercise, I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to get toned. I want to do this. And a lot of goals tend to be very, very physical. But the thing is, what I love about exercise is that it does so much more than that. It doesn't just affect your outward appearance, but it does so many other things, including your sense of independence. I overheard a story of another trainer on another podcast, and he talked about, he had this one client who she traveled a lot for work, and she was just excited that she was able to take her suitcase and load it onto the upper cabin herself, and that she didn't need somebody else to do it for her. So that sense of independence, and as we get older, that becomes even more important. I've had clients who lived in older buildings who didn't have an elevator, and suddenly their fear of using the stairs basically trapped them in their own homes. So it is that idea of like, we want to be as independent as possible. We want to be able to go on long walks. We want to be able to get out of a chair by ourselves. We want to be able to get out of bed, have a shower, and all these things, doing them independently. Next, we really want to think about balance and falls risk. That's going to be kind of like the huge thing that a lot of people talk about in kind of the senior care and kind of senior care world. So we really do want to think about that falls risk. Next is metabolic health. So again, people think of muscle as, what you use to stay strong, or kind of that physical appearance. But our muscles do so much more than that, and it does help to do things like regulating blood pressure and support a healthy body composition, right? So again, not just physical appearance. A lot of people who get into strength training, they might even physically not change too much, but to even just be burning more calories, and using up more fat storage, and just replacing some of our fat storage with muscle can actually do a huge benefit to our overall metabolic health. And then lastly, confidence and energy. I hear it all the time that I don't want to exercise, or I feel I can't exercise because I don't have the energy. But you'd be surprised that actually working out on a regular basis actually does help to give you energy. I've had a recent client who's had a stroke, and she kind of found that. She said that for a couple of years, she didn't feel like she could do anything. She felt she was kind of trapped. She kind of just accepted her fate from the stroke. But as we started exercising, she found that she was able to move more, have more confidence, and even something as simple as when she was using the recumbent bike, she was able to go at a much faster pace without feeling like anything was happening. Without getting out of breath, without, worrying about how she's feeling. So it was really great to even just see something like that. I always like looking at different research studies, because it's one thing to think about it and see it with my clients day to day. I always like seeing what the research is saying and what they recommend. So one study found that if you exercise pretty heavily for 1 year, that benefit can stick around for up to 4 years. So it's that idea of, just because you are physically active today, it actually can help you even down the road. And what I always try to warn people about with findings like this is, it doesn't mean you should exercise for 1 year and then take a 3-year break. Why I find this so interesting is, I think of people, like a lot of the people that I work with, who maybe have had a heart attack, a stroke, some sort of major medical condition, which has limited their ability to move and to walk around and to stay independent. What can happen is that if you try to stay as strong as you can, then even if you have a heart attack or a stroke or some sort of medical issue, your body has that strength that you've been building, and it treats it almost as a reserve. So I find that part really helpful, to be able to make sure that people are as active and as healthy as we can, even despite a medical issue. Next is making sure that we are not relying on things like protein powders and energy drinks to get our physical or to get our strength going. So I'll hear that every once in a while, where somebody will say, it's like, well, I'm taking the protein drink, I'm doing the protein powders, I'm taking the creatine, I'm doing all these things, but nothing is happening. And my response is always, well, you have to make sure you're putting in the effort of doing the physical activity. So it's not just about, I've taken my protein powder, but we have to make sure we are going out, that we are exercising, that we are building those muscles, because if we are not sending our bodies the proper signals of, hey, we really want to build this muscle. Your body isn't just going to spontaneously build strong muscles and bones. You have to tell it that. However, kind of on the flip side, protein intake is very important for strength training. So it's that idea of, the exercising is going to give your body the stimulus to actually want to build stronger bones and stronger muscle, but we also want to make sure we're giving it the proper nutrients. I always think of it like, if you wanted to build a house, you need the construction workers and the tradesmen and all of that, and you need the materials to get the job done. You can't really have one without the other. So you want to make sure that you are eating a well-balanced diet with good protein intake, supplement if needed, but you do want to make sure you're considering both of those sides. So you do want to make sure that you do train first, but then also fuel that training with a good, proper protein intake. So for those of you who maybe are new to strength training, so the idea is, how do we train for muscle growth and muscle stimulation? So we do want to aim for maybe 2 to 3 times a week. You can do more. You do want to make sure that, especially if you're new to this, you want to take your time. I had somebody recently, she joined a group class, and she was saying that, she was quite limited, and I kind of told the instructor that it's like, hey, this person's going to join, and to just keep in mind that she's got some sore joints. And she did probably about maybe 25 to 50% of the actual workout, and she was sore for about 3 to 4 days. So you do want to make sure that you are taking your time if you're new to this. You want to do a good full body session with some rest days in between, right? So again, we don't want to overwork certain muscles that maybe have not been that worked out in a while. We also want to progress the load. So the idea is gradually adding weight or resistance as exercises start to feel easy. So there's tons of different ways that you can do that. One idea is you increase your resistance about 10% a week. So we can do it that way. Or the other thing I often think about is, if let's say you're doing 10 repetitions, well, it should start feeling hard around like rep 7. So the idea is, if you're at rep 2 and you're really struggling, then it's too heavy. The resistance is way too much. But if you've done 10 and that felt like a walk in the park, then maybe it's time to up the resistance a little bit. The other thing is, don't fear heavier weights once your form is solid. So that's going to be the fine tuning, is don't be adding the weight when you haven't really gotten the form properly. I see it all the time where people are exercising, but maybe, they're not bending their hips right, or their knees, or their posture, or their breathing, or something. There's something that's not being done correctly, and then they pack on the weight. That can lead to injury, so you do definitely want to take your time. But once you're getting a really good hang of this, then you can maybe add more weights. And the other thing too is, especially if you want like a really good, efficient workout, you want to maybe think about focusing on those bigger muscles, right? So like our big leg muscles and our core and our arms, we want to work those bigger muscles, and then fine tune, especially for maybe if you have any sort of issue, maybe if you've had rotator cuff injuries in the past, or you've had an ankle injury, or if you're like me and have injured almost every part of your body at some point in your life, then you can start fine tuning and maybe adding some of those very specific muscles, kind of those smaller supporting muscles. But again, if you're kind of new to this, maybe start with some of the bigger muscles and the more major exercises. Now, as I previously mentioned, you do want to make sure you're fueling yourself properly. What I love about the new Canada Food Guide, it's so much easier than what I learned way back in school. Before they talked about like the food pyramid, and you needed like 6 to 7 servings of this and 7 to 11 servings of that. But the thing is, that didn't really account for each individual person. Every individual person is going to need more or less food depending on what they're doing. Somebody who maybe doesn't exercise and maybe works a desk job is going to look very, very different than maybe somebody who works a very heavy duty job and goes to the gym on a regular basis. Those two individuals are going to need drastically different nutritional intakes. And it'll kind of depend. It kind of depends on the individual, depends on what's going on medically. So you do definitely want to maybe talk to somebody about your specific setup. But the general recommendation is going to be about aiming for 1 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight on a daily basis. So sometimes what happens is people do it for maybe 2-3 days, then you fall off the wagon. And don't feel bad about that. That's super common, that happens to everybody, myself included. So that is going to be the general thing you want to look at. And the idea too is you want to spread it out. So I've seen like really like random videos of people like trying to almost have that entire intake in one meal. And that's just not how your body works. Your body can't process that much all at once. So you do want to spread it out amongst breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And like I said before, you do want to pair the food with your training. So protein does help support muscle repair, but only alongside resistance training. So again, you need both halves. The other thing, make sure you're getting plenty of rest and sleep. Muscle actually rebuilds on your rest days. So that's kind of another interesting point, is that when you're exercising, it's not at that moment that your muscles are getting stronger. It's actually the next day or the next few days as your muscles are repairing themselves. So that soreness you feel, again, is kind of normal. You do want that soreness to go away within like a day. If it's sticking around for 3-4 days, probably means we did a little bit too much, right? And then that doesn't mean that, you should just give up. It just means that, we just got to turn the dial down a little bit. Now, the other thing too is you definitely want to check in with your doctor, right? Especially if you've got any sort of medical issues, heart, joint, other health issues, especially if you're new to this. If you're a diabetic, if you've got blood pressure issues, if you've got osteoporosis or osteoarthritis. Again, always good to kind of check in with your doctor to make sure that you're medically okay to do so. And then, like I said before, is making sure we're mastering the form first. So begin light, learn each movement, and then add resistance. So even something as simple as certain shoulder exercises, we got to make sure we've got good posture, and then we can add on the resistance. Because even myself, if I try to do any sort of strength training and I've got bad posture in my shoulders, or maybe I've got bad alignment in my hips or knees, that is going to, we're really going to start feeling it. So we do want to make sure we're keeping that form correct first. Then maybe getting some expert guidance. So maybe talking to a kinesiologist, talking to an exercise physiologist about how to do each exercise. You can always go for a personal trainer, and I have met so many out there that are just fantastic. I currently work with a really great trainer that I know, and again, it just really depends on what your situation is, what's going on medically, and the experience and the training of that particular trainer or kinesiologist. Then you want to make sure you're progressing gradually. So like I said, a lot of people have this tendency to really pack on the weight very quickly. So you do want to take your time, But I've also seen the opposite happen as well, where somebody will maybe work out the exact same way for a very, very long time, and then they wonder why they're not getting any stronger. Well, if we don't up the resistance, then our strength isn't really going to change. And then the other absolute huge thing is consistency. So I always say, like, two things you really, really need when you're starting to exercise is you need patience and persistence. You need patience because you have to make sure that you are patient with yourself. So many people want to go from 0 to 60 so quickly, and they want to be able to achieve their goals so quickly. But the problem is we do need to be patient. Our body only heals, only grows at a certain rate. So we can't click the fast forward button. But we also have to be consistent, and we have to make sure that we are exercising on a regular basis. I've heard time and time again where it's just like, oh, yes, I will exercise tomorrow. But then the problem is tomorrow becomes next week, becomes next month, becomes next year. And, you see it all the time, like the people who do the New Year's resolutions. For anybody who is a regular gym goer, you often notice that the gyms become super, super packed in January and then start to die off even by February. And a lot of times that's because people tried to do way too much, way too quickly, and then found that their real life couldn't sustain the plan that they had determined. So you really want to make sure you're consistent, but make sure it fits in your own life. So whether it's exercising with a friend, going for a walk, doing some exercises at home, I often recommend try to keep things low cost until you've kept up that consistency. And then if you want to get some gym equipment, if you want to get maybe like a gym membership, right? I do recommend try to keep up that consistency first. So the bottom line is it's never too late to get stronger. Yes, older adults can build real muscle and strength with resistance training. I have seen it time and time and time again. Training is the engine, protein is the fuel. You need both, right? So you can't do one, can't just do the other. You want to make sure you're tackling both. And you can always think there are definitely cost-effective protein options. You don't have to be eating like steak every single day. There's tons and tons of options, whether you're vegetarian, vegan, if you live in a food desert, there's tons of different ways that you can tackle that protein intake. You want to have heavier progressive loads, and that helps to deliver bigger and longer lasting results. And then the payoff goes way beyond muscle. Independence, balance, and confidence. I have seen it, again, time and time again. It's been so cool to work with so many people who have had different issues in their lives, and then they build up that confidence. And to me, like, that seems to be the very, very first thing you want to tackle, is just knowing that you can do this. That I've the oldest person I've ever worked with was 105. And he was very, very dedicated. I've had people where they had a particular goal, and even during the conversation, they felt it was unrealistic. And then we talked about, well, here's how we can make it a realistic goal. For example, I have taught several seniors on, how to get up from the floor safely. That is always a huge, huge fear of people. So you do want to, maybe that's a goal you want to work towards. So again, you do want to make sure that you are taking your time, but are being consistent with it. And just remember, start this week. 2 or 3 sessions could really reshape your next decade. It's not about starting tomorrow, next week, next month, but trying to find ways to sneak it into your everyday life. Now, if you're interested, feel free to reach out. If you ever have any specific questions, if you ever want to have a consultation and a quick, meeting online, feel free to reach out, and then we could potentially work on creating a plan that is realistic and reasonable, depending on whatever's going on in your life, because everybody often needs some sort of customized plan for their life, whether it's taking into account your medical condition, maybe your living situation, maybe your time constraints. There's going to be tons of things to figure out, but if you do take the chance to sit down and figure out a plan, you'd be really surprised what you can achieve.